All right, diving in today, Novo Nordisk. Big name in healthcare, especially with all the buzz around diabetes and this exploding market for obesity treatments. We've got a stack of research here, analyst reports, their own filings, some news articles, and well, it paints a picture of a real pharmaceutical powerhouse.
Yeah, definitely a company worth understanding. And that's exactly our goal today, to take all this info, all these different perspectives, and distill it down to the core. What makes Novo Nordisk tick?
Exactly. We want our listeners to come away with a solid grasp of their business, how they're managed, their financial health, basically everything you need to assess them as a potential long-term investment.
Absolutely. So we'll start with the fundamentals of their business, how they operate, then move to their leadership and financials. And then in the second half, we'll dig into market sentiment, their ownership structure, and of course, the key risks and opportunities. Ready to jump in?
Let's do it. First things first, what exactly does Novo Nordisk do? We know they're global, they're pharmaceutical, but what's their specialty?
At their core, they're discovering, developing, manufacturing, and commercializing pharmaceuticals. But their focus is narrow, serious, chronic diseases. Not just everyday ailments, but conditions that really impact people's lives over the long term.
And we're talking about four main therapeutic areas, right? Diabetes care, obesity care, rare blood disorders, and rare endocrine disorders. So a pretty diverse range, it seems.
Yes, diverse, but with a clear emphasis emerging. Their GLP-1-based therapies, these are really taking center stage. You've got Ozempic, mainly for type 2 diabetes, and Wegovy, specifically for weight management.
And these GLP-1 drugs, they're not just about managing blood sugar, right? They work on appetite, too, something about the brain.
Exactly. It's this dual action that sets them apart, much more effective than older treatments. And that's a big reason they're in such high demand right now.
It does feel like these GLP-1s are their star players. But they're not putting all their eggs in one basket, are they? There's Rybelsus, the oral version of semaglutide, a huge deal for patients who, prefer a pill. Then there's Victoza, which is an older GLP-1, plus all those insulin products.
Absolutely. And they're not neglecting those other therapeutic areas either. Rare blood disorders, they have Novo-8 and Novo-7, essential for hemophilia treatment. Norditropin's a key player in rare endocrine disorders. Plus, they've got promising new therapies in development for all these areas, like Mim8 and Alhemo for blood disorders, and somapacitan for endocrine issues.
And let's not forget, they're global, truly global. Operations in over 80 countries, products available in around 170. That's got to be a major strength.
Definitely. This international reach diversifies their revenue streams. Plus, it shields them from risk tied to any single market or regulatory environment.
Speaking of strategic moves, their focus on obesity care seems incredibly smart. It's a global health concern that's only growing, and they're right there on the front lines with effective treatments.
Absolutely. Obesity is increasingly recognized as a serious chronic disease, and their GLP-1 medications are showing real results for weight loss. They're positioned perfectly to lead in this market, which has huge potential for growth.
The numbers back that up, too. Over 33% global value share in diabetes as of 2023, and a whopping 63% volume share in the GLP-1 segment. That's serious market dominance.
It gives them some serious leverage. Think pricing power, influence over treatment guidelines, but being the leader also makes you a target, both for competitors and regulators.
And they're putting their money where their mouth is, investing heavily in manufacturing to keep up with that demand, especially for Wegovy. Over DKK 129 billion in 2024 alone. That's a huge commitment.
It is, but it speaks volumes about their confidence in the sustained demand for their products. It's crucial for maintaining their edge and meeting the market's needs.
Okay, so we've covered what they do, the markets they're in, their impressive market share. But what about the people calling the shots? How do we assess the management team in Novo Nordisk?
Evaluating management is crucial. We want a leadership team with vision, a proven track record, and the ability to handle the complexities of the pharmaceutical world.
What specifically should we be looking at? Are there any red flags or green flags?
Look at their strategic decisions. That early focus on GLP-1 therapies, the massive investment in manufacturing capacity, how they approach R&D and acquisitions like Catalent. These are all signs of strategic thinking and foresight.
And what about experience and expertise? What do we know about the leadership team's background?
Well, we might not have their full resumes, but the results speak for themselves. Consistent growth in revenue and profits, bringing innovative drugs to market, navigating regulatory hurdles, these all point to a competent leadership team. And a stable, long-tenured team is generally a good sign, too. It suggests experience and consistency in their strategic direction.
I imagine fostering innovation is super important for a pharmaceutical company. How does Novo Nordisk measure up in that regard?
It's absolutely critical. In this industry, you either innovate or you fade away. So we want to see strong R&D investment, a healthy pipeline of new drug candidates, and a willingness to explore new therapeutic areas and technologies. Novo Nordisk seems to be doing well there, consistently investing in R&D even with their current blockbusters doing so well.
And how about adapting to change? Healthcare is constantly evolving. Can Novo Nordisk keep up?
Adaptability is key. Look at how they've responded to new competitors like Eli Lilly in the obesity market, their willingness to explore combination therapies like Carglumic, their investments in expanding manufacturing. These are all signs of a company that can adjust to the changing landscape.
Last question on management. How much emphasis should we place on ethical conduct and good corporate governance?
In pharmaceuticals, ethical conduct and good governance are non-negotiable. Patient safety, transparency in trials, responsible marketing, these are must-haves. Any lapses there can lead to serious reputational and financial damage.
Right. And our research did mention some past scrutiny of Novo Nordisk's marketing. So it's important to see how they responded, what measures they've taken to prevent similar issues in the future.
Definitely. And the strong oversight from the Novo Nordisk Foundation, which we'll discuss later, also plays a role here. It contributes to their long-term focus and a sense of responsibility that goes beyond just profits.
Makes sense. All right, time to delve into the numbers.
Yes.
What does Novo Nordisk's financial health look like?
As of late March 2025, their market cap is massive, around DKK 2.1 trillion, which is over $300 billion USD. That's a clear sign that the market recognizes their value.
And their price-to-earnings ratio, it's around 21. Is that a good sign?
It suggests their stock is reasonably valued relative to their earnings. Some might even argue it's undervalued considering their growth potential.
Speaking of growth, their revenue has been on a tear. A CAGR of almost 19% over the past 5 years, and then bam, a 25% net sales increase in 2024. That's got to be driven by those blockbuster drugs.
Exactly. It shows how well they're capitalizing on the strong demand for their key therapies, especially in diabetes and obesity care. They're not just innovating, they're successfully bringing those innovations to market.
And their profit margins, wow, they're seriously impressive. Gross margins in the 84 to 85% range, operating margins around 44%, and net margins between 34 and 36%. Those are numbers many companies would dream of.
It all points to significant pricing power, likely due to the unique benefits of their drugs and that high demand we talked about. Plus, it suggests they're managing their operations efficiently, keeping costs under control.
Okay, but their debt-to-equity ratio did jump up to around 0.62 to 0.72 in late 2024. You mentioned the Catalent acquisition likely played a role there. Is that level of debt concerning?
It's something to watch, but it's still manageable for a company this size and this profitable. Remember, acquiring Catalent's manufacturing sites was a strategic move to secure their supply chain. That debt should be viewed in that context.
Right, and they have a strong track record of generating cash flow, so they should be able to handle it.
Exactly. The strong cash flow should allow them to manage this debt effectively.
Speaking of cash flow, that Catalent acquisition did lead to negative free cash flow in 2024, around DKK 14.7 billion, mostly because of that upfront payment. But they're projecting a big rebound in 2025.
That's right. The negative free cash flow is mainly due to that strategic investment, but the projected recovery to DKK 75 to 85 billion in 2025 shows that their core business is still a cash-generating machine.
Their price-to-book ratio is also pretty high, between 14.5 and 16.9. What does that tell us?
A high price-to-book ratio means the market values their assets much higher than their accounting book value. This usually reflects high profitability, strong growth expectations, and valuable intangible assets like intellectual property and brand reputation, all of which apply to Novo Nordisk.
So big picture, their financials look pretty solid. Strong growth, high profitability, and that dip in free cash flow is likely just a blip on the radar due to a smart acquisition.
Absolutely. Their financial performance really underscores their strength and market leadership.
Okay, before we get into market sentiment, ownership, and the risks facing Novo Nordisk, let's take a quick break to talk about a tool that can help you unlock these kinds of insights on demand. Imagine having access to in-depth analysis, just like this deep dive, on any stock whenever you need it. And what if you could tailor that analysis to your specific level of understanding and the areas you're most interested in? Well, at stockanalytics.ai, we're building exactly that. Our platform goes beyond just generating comprehensive reports, podcasts, and videos on stocks. It features a powerful interactive interface where you can ask specific questions, a voice-controlled stock screener to find new opportunities, and a portfolio analyzer to help you manage and stress test your investments. Don't miss out on the future of financial intelligence. Visit stockanalytics.ai today to see our demo and join our waiting list. We're offering 50% discounts for early access and even opportunities to invest in our growth. Sign up now at stockanalytics.ai. That's stockanalytics.ai.
All right, let's dive back into Novo Nordisk, specifically how the market is viewing them right now. What's the sentiment like out there?
It's been a little mixed recently. Their stock took a dip in March 2025. Seems like investors got a bit spooked by some early phase 3 data for cagrilintide, their combination therapy for diabetes and obesity, concerns about its long-term efficacy.
Yeah, makes sense. Even with Ozempic and Wegovy doing so well, the market's always looking ahead. Any uncertainty about key pipeline drugs like cagrilintide can create some short-term jitters. It's a good reminder that pharmaceutical development comes with inherent risks.
But despite that pullback, the long-term view seems pretty positive. A lot of analysts are still bullish.
That's right. The analyst ratings are still mostly favorable, with a lot of buy or outperform recommendations out there. And those average price targets suggest a good amount of potential upside from current levels. It shows there's still a strong belief in the company's long-term value and growth.
So it sounds like news and developments around their key drugs, demand, supply, competition, those things, plus clinical trial results and regulatory announcements can really swing the stock in the short term.
Definitely. Positive news like expanded approvals for existing drugs or good data from clinical trials can really boost the stock. But any setbacks can send it the other way.
What about short interest? Are there a lot of investors betting against Novo Nordisk?
Short interest seems pretty low, which suggests there's not a widespread belief that the stock is headed for a major decline. Another sign of that positive sentiment we were talking about.
You also mentioned that looking at options data can give us some clues about market sentiment. How so?
Options trading can reveal a lot about expectations for future volatility and price direction. For example, if a lot of call options are being bought at a certain price, it could indicate that traders are expecting the stock to climb to that level. It's like taking a peek into the market's collective mindset.
So considering all the recent price dip, the strong fundamentals, the optimistic analysts, it sounds like this could be a good entry point for long-term investors.
It's definitely worth considering, especially for those who believe in Novo Nordisk's underlying strength and future growth. But as always, do your own research before making any decisions.
Good advice. Now, let's shift gears and talk about who owns Novo Nordisk. What's the ownership structure like? Anything unusual?
One thing that stands out is their high level of institutional ownership. Big names like BlackRock and Vanguard have significant stakes in the company. That kind of institutional backing is often a vote of confidence in the company's long-term prospects.
And what about insider ownership? Do the executives and directors have skin in the game?
Now, Novo Nordisk is listed on U.S. exchanges, but it's a foreign private issuer, so the rules about reporting insider trades are a bit different. You might not find detailed data in the standard SEC filings, but it's often available through financial data providers and the company's investor relations materials.
Got it. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room. The Novo Nordisk Foundation. They play a big role here, don't they?
Yeah. They absolutely do. Novo Nordisk has a very concentrated ownership structure, and Novo Holdings AS is the largest shareholder. But the key is, Novo Holdings is entirely owned by the Novo Nordisk Foundation. As of late 2024, the foundation controlled about 28% of the share capital. But get this, they had around 77% of the voting power through their Class A shares.
Wow, so they have significant control over the company. What's the thinking behind that kind of structure?
The Novo Nordisk Foundation has two main objectives. First, they want to provide a stable and long-term ownership base for all the companies in the Novo Group, including Novo Nordisk. That long-term view is crucial in an industry with such long development cycles and big capital investments.
So stability and a focus on the long game. What's the second objective?
The foundation is also a major philanthropic organization. They support all kinds of scientific and humanitarian causes.
Interesting. So they're not just about profits, this concentrated ownership, this dual-class share system. How does that impact how Novo Nordisk is governed?
It creates a lot of stability. It shields the company from short-term market pressures, which can be a huge advantage in a research-heavy field like pharmaceuticals. But it also means that minority shareholders have less say in things because of the foundation's outsized voting power.
But that foundation focus, balancing financial returns with their philanthropic goals, that could be really attractive to certain investors, right? Those who are looking for long-term sustainability, not just quick profits.
Absolutely. It's a unique strength, a commitment to both financial success and broader societal benefits. It could contribute to the company's resilience in the long run, but of course, investors need to understand the implications of that dual-class structure, that concentration of voting power.
Right, good point. Okay, let's move on to our risk assessment. We've got this SWOT analysis here. Let's start with their strengths. What are they doing well?
Well, first off, they've got a really strong global brand, especially with those blockbuster drugs. They're the leaders in the diabetes market, and they're rapidly gaining ground in obesity care, which is a booming market.
Right, and they've got that impressive R&D pipeline setting them up for future growth.
Exactly. Plus, they have a massive global presence, high profit margins, an experienced management team, and that stable long-term ownership from the Novo Nordisk Foundation. And let's not forget, the pharmaceutical industry itself has some pretty high barriers to entry, which helps protect established players like them.
So lots of strengths, but what about weaknesses? Where are they vulnerable?
Well, they've had some trouble keeping up with demand for their most popular drugs. Potential supply constraints are a real concern because if they can't meet demand, it'll impact revenue.
And competition's heating up, right?
Mhm.
Especially in that lucrative obesity market. Companies like Eli Lilly are right on their heels.
Definitely. And then there's the constant pressure on drug pricing and the evolving regulatory landscape, especially in the US, which is a key market for them. They've also faced scrutiny for some of their past marketing practices, and that Catalent acquisition did lead to some negative free cash flow, at least temporarily.
Okay, so some challenges to keep an eye on. But what about opportunities? Where could Novo Nordisk go from here?
Well, diabetes and obesity markets are both growing rapidly, so there's still tons of room to expand there.
And their pipeline, with CagriSema and potentially some oral GLP-1 drugs, that could be huge.
Absolutely. They could also branch out into other chronic disease areas. And leveraging digital health and AI, those are big opportunities in healthcare. Plus, they could continue expanding access to their medicines in developing countries.
So lots of potential paths to growth. But let's not forget about threats. What are the biggest risks they face?
Competition is a constant threat, especially in obesity care. And there's always the risk of generic or biosimilar versions of their older drugs hitting the market and eating into their share.
Right. And what about regulations?
Unfavorable regulatory changes or price controls imposed by governments could really hurt their profitability. Setbacks in clinical trials are always a possibility in this industry, and any disruptions to their supply chain or problems scaling up manufacturing could also cause problems. Finally, they need to stay on top of those ethical and reputational risks, making sure their operations and marketing are squeaky clean.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. It seems like Novo Nordisk checks a lot of the boxes for value investors.
Definitely. Strong fundamentals, huge growth potential in their key markets, a solid competitive position, and that stable long-term ownership structure, it's a compelling case.
But investors need to be aware of those risks we talked about, like rising competition and the ever-changing regulatory landscape.
Exactly. Understanding both the strengths and the weaknesses is crucial for making informed investment decisions.
Now, for a final thought, something to chew on. Think about how Novo Nordisk's ownership structure, with our powerful Novo Nordisk Foundation, not only provides stability, but also shapes their priorities. It's not just about profits for them. They're driven by this dual mission of commercial success and supporting scientific and humanitarian causes. Could that be a key factor in their long-term success and resilience? It's something worth pondering.
It's an interesting question. That unique blend of purpose could be a real differentiator, driving both innovation and trust.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Novo Nordisk. If you enjoyed this analysis and want to explore more company breakdowns and market insights, make sure you subscribe to the Stock Analytics AI YouTube channel. We've got a ton of resources to help you become a more informed investor.
And as always, a quick disclaimer. The information we've discussed today is for informational purposes only and is not financial advice. Also, AI was used in creating some of the content we talked about, so do your own research before making any investment decisions.